So, just a bit of show of hands to see who's in the room. How many of you work in the financial services sector? Good. Lawyers in the room? IRS? Come on now. I know there's at least two of you. I saw you earlier. Any developers in the room? Good number. Students, startups, people with startups that are generating revenue. Yeah, that always happens. So good on you, you guys. So there's a good mix in the crowd. I'll give you a bit of a background. So I started working in blockchain when we did an innovation workshop in London for Western Union on changes that are happening in the payment space. So we did a whole 2 days where they flew all their payments guys out to London. We took them around. And forgive me for my accent. I grew up in Virginia, lived 5 years in Richmond, then moved to London. I've been there for 10 years. I met my wife there, so my accent's a bit all over the place now because of that. So apologies. My brothers tell me they're going to kick my ass if I start saying vitamin. So they're vitamins, if anybody asks. So that's where my accent comes from. But going back to where this all started, we started looking into all the changes that are happening in payments. That got us excited into, looking into Bitcoin. This was 2012. And then I was actually going to buy some mining machines back then, I think 2013 from Butterfly Labs. I used PayPal to buy it, which means I could get my refund because they weren't going to be delivered until months later. I should have just bought Bitcoin at that time because it was really cheap. So I've been, I feel like I missed the boat there. And then Ethereum came, and I bought some Ethereum in order to buy onto the DAO. And I bought Ethereum, I think, for I think it was like $20 at the time, which was one of my best investments in crypto ever. And the only reason why it went up and stayed up was because I lost my private key. And I couldn't go against my instincts to sell it when it was doing all kinds of fluctuations. So if I ever do find a hacker that can do a brute force attack on my own password, then I'll get that out. But I feel like I've missed the boat a few times. And then we started running blockchain conferences in 2015. So this is our 29th, possibly even 30th now. So we've been all over the world running these events. We've been meeting people. Last summer we had the guys from EOS sponsor the summer roadshow. I think to date they've raised something like 2 million. So we've seen some good ones. We've seen some weird ones. We've seen some great ones. But there's a lot of interesting things happening. So long story short, I don't want to do all this and not have a horse in the race. So this is a concept that we've been working on for a few years now, a little bit here and there. It started off as an IoT project for the insurance sector that morphed into a blockchain project. And as blockchain has changed, and you guys have sort of seen it, I like to say that 6 months is like, 2 years in blockchain dog years because of how fast things move. So things have been moving really quickly. What we wanted to do last year is completely different from what we're doing now, because the market moves that quickly. So what we're doing now is we're going back to the old school, as they say. We're starting out with a product that we've built that's a MVP. We're focusing on getting users. We're trying to make sure that the whole thing works without blockchain, and trying to make sure that we have something that's tangible. And eventually we may or may not have a coin or a token, but we want to make sure that this whole thing works. So that was probably the longest build up. So I'm going to do a short presentation. So Census, data as a currency. We want to make your data behave more like a currency. And that is, all of you are generating data. And how many of you are earning something for it? That is about right. So nobody is earning anything off of their data, give or take. But I would say Facebook and some of these other companies combined are probably mining somewhere between $700 and $800 from each and every one of you for all the services that you use, whether you know it or not, per year. So some of that could be yours. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it so that you can monetize your own data. It all starts with the user, which is you. And this is data you're already creating. There's already information about you. Experian has it. They shared it with a lot of people. I believe there's other companies that have some of your information. I don't know, maybe some of the Russians do. No offense to any Russians, but apparently they can get information. Then there's your actions, what you do. You do things that are tracked digitally. Again, that's another data set that's pretty valuable. Google tracks a lot of that in your background. So does Apple. So a lot of your actions, sometimes they're used for Q&A on your phone. Sometimes they're used for other reasons. But your information, your actions, then there's your services, what you listen to, what you watch, what music, there's a lot of data that you're creating. When you're watching television, you're creating all these things. And then there's your devices, because you're not just your phone. You have your smart TV, you have your Alexa listening in on you. You have lots of things that you're connected that make you you. Your car, for example, it's not always connected. So there's all these things that make up who you are. So the concept that we're creating is pretty simple. We are creating an app. Well, we've created an app. It's basic at the moment, but it's one account, so that you can then tap multiple data sets that you create to it. Pretty simple, but we're making it modular because if we didn't, this would be a giant beast of a project with lots of tentacles. And you don't know where to start. So it starts with one account, basic app that we've built now that you can easily download at census.xyz or XYZ, as they say in the UK. Census.xyz, you can download it and it allows you to take surveys. Right now you can take the surveys and earn points, because points aren't regulated. They're like miles. We're not doing anything with crypto or tokens. We want to make sure that it works. We have a couple hundred users on it. We're testing it. You can download it now, fill out some information, and earn some points. In the future, in markets where we can allow people to use those points, we'll allow you to use those points to buy tokens. So the points can be converted may or may not be converted in markets where that is possible. In markets where it's not possible, we'll keep them as points and allow people to exit through gift cards or other means. That way you don't ever have to touch crypto in places where that's not possible. So it's one account. And the areas that we're looking at to do modules, so we have two modules that we're working on in the background with our tech guys, and that's telematics, which is driving data. Social check-ins, which is pretty basic. That's market research companies want to incentivize watching videos or reading white papers, health and fitness, and also smart TVs through software-based database that pings snippets and listens to what you're watching. So the formatting is a little bit skewed, but basically it's a simple model where we start with users who want to earn and buyers who want the valuable data. Right now we're starting with the basic app that does surveys, and we're working with market research firms to run surveys. Pretty simple. There's other companies doing that, but that is probably the easiest thing to build for us. That's an MVP. In the background, we're working on television views in a software format. There's a hardware way of doing it, but we want to focus on software at the moment. Then there's social check-ins. You can geofence, and for example, we can say if, I don't know, let's say Foot Locker, somebody wanted to give you points for shoes, you can earn 5 points or eventually tokens for doing a check-in at a Foot Locker. So this is incentivizing the check-ins with tokens. But we start with the buyers because we can't do any of this without having all the set parameters that the buyers want. And we wouldn't want to just collect random data. That would be too much for us to hold and be of no value. So we start with the buyers, get all the different data formats that they want, and then proceed. So every market has to start with the buyer, or else there's no reason for us to do it. Because every market has to be made in that sense. But because a lot of you guys work in finance, I'll focus more on the insurance side of it. So there's the other elements there. But with governments, you can even incentivize people to learn about. So if there's a problem with, let's say, like malaria in some country, anybody with a smartphone who does this and goes through a tutorial learning about malaria can earn points for actually taking that information in. So you can incentivize education through this. So there's lots of different modules that you can do through this. But let's just focus on the basic one. So let's start with car telematics, car data, and insurance. So that's you. You're a driver, and you decide to download the app, and the car driving module is live. We've already worked with the insurance company, so we know the data parameters that they're looking for. You share your data, and it's your driving data, how plotted along the map, how good you drive, how fast, how quick you accelerate, how quickly you brake. If you're a good driver, bad driver, all that stuff will be based on the insurer's description of what that means. So the way you get paid is insurance companies pay to view your profile. They don't get your personal information. They're seeing your profile. Are you a good driver, bad driver, high risk, low risk, that sort of profile. And then once they see the profile, they can then do a second payment and make you an offer. So if you're a really good driver, they can say, all right, we'll insure you for $200 a year because there's a good chance that you're not going to run into any accidents. Or they could compete for bad drivers and say, you know what, no one's going to insure you. $3,000 a year, take it or leave it, we'll insure you, but it's going to cost you that much. So you can compete for the prime or subprime or whatever you want to call it. However they describe it, they can look at the parameters and sort that. So the user gets two payments, one for viewing, the other when the offer is made, and at the end, they'll have a policy. And it's a way for, then they'd have to join the program with the black box and the other parameters that the insurance companies have. But what's happening is there's a marketplace for your driving data, and we're creating it by working with several companies and aligning on the parameters and providing the buyer data, and the buyers get points or tokens at two different instances. So that's the insurance. This could also work with television data, but it would be a slightly more of a subscription service where you share your viewing habits throughout time. So that's, in a nutshell, what the concept is. So we've built the app. It's downloadable now. We're testing it. We're working with a couple market research firms to get the data pilot going, and also working to build the telematics software and the television viewing modules so that you can have those two towards the end of the year. We're thinking of doing a crowd sale, but the crowd sale is going to be triggered by having somewhere between 2,000 and 5,000 users and 1 to 2 use cases with pilots with corporates. So those are the two things that would trigger us announcing that we're exploring a token sale. We need to prove that this thing is viable first, and then that would trigger the token exploration. So we're looking to grow it. We're looking for partners. We're looking for people in like telecoms partners so that you can cash out to mobile top-ups. So if you can imagine, the Trojan horse here is if we can get a Census branded Android phone that's free or cheap in most parts of the world, by giving us 3-4 months worth of data, you can get a free phone. Same thing with televisions. If we can build it into the hardware and actually get TVs for free or cheap to lots of places in the world, there's a market for it, and you're providing the data already, but we can get you the TVs at a fraction of the cost because you're already going to share the data. And after that, you can then keep the rest. So there's an end goal of envisioning a ecosystem where you have hardware, IoT devices, different sensors, user data, and different ways of earning. But all of these require partnerships. So that's it. I think we're probably running out of time here, but we're looking to make it so that users don't ever have to touch crypto, so that you click a few buttons, agree to sharing certain data. It's all transparent. And then to cash out, you can cash out through vouchers or vouchers or mobile top-ups, so that there's never any crypto. That way, the barrier to entry is lowered, and you don't have to spend 60% of the time explaining what crypto is. We're also exploring a partnership with EOS to be an app on their platform, partially because they have funds to explore with companies that are building on their platform. And that's it. Any questions? We have a good team here. One of our advisors is in the room, JR. Big shout out to JR. Part of the reason why we're in Seattle is because that man over there, we met in DC last year, had a good chat, really interested in what they were doing with Omnicoin, and thought, you know what, we need to bring this show out here because the ecosystem is thriving. So That's a bit about Census. Any questions? Yes.
What kind of transparency are we talking about from the user side of who's sharing their data and getting told to?
Oh, we're going to keep it as opaque as possible. No, the so in Europe they have the GDPR regulation, and one of the features of that is that you have to tell users have to opt in, and they have to know every single instance of what the data is being used. So anytime somebody wants to pay you for your data, they have to tell you all the different ways that the data is going to be used. So we're the marketplace, and they can't participate without being compliant. And the user can't participate in earning unless they are in agreement with the way that the data is going to be used. So it's one of these things where it's a catch-22. If you want to earn the data, you have to agree to some terms that you might not like. The more personal data that you give, though, the higher the payout should be. Yep.
But probably this question is coming from me. What happens when the government wants to subpoena data?
So in the pilot phase, we are a traditional company. So we'll have a server centralized. It'll be like a normal company where all the app data is on a server. But once we get to the DLT stage, when we're actually building a blockchain decentralized product, the data sets will be on the user's phone. So they'll be locked in the phone, and they'll have to give you permission for it. So we're not selling their data, they're selling their own data, and it's housed in their phone. Initially, we are not going that far because it's more technically challenging to do so. But in the future, you can host the data through zero-knowledge proofs, and actually the number of people can host the data, but it ultimately is the user with the private key of that data can unlock it. So it won't be up to, in the first phase it'll be us. Once we build the more scaled product, it'll be up to the user to decide that. So you need to subpoena the user if you want their data.
Take one more question.
Yep. It depends on the buyer. So we are going to be vetting the buyers initially and having terms and conditions on what they can do with the data, but they can set the terms and conditions of how they're going to use the data, and it's up to the user to agree or not. So we're the intermediary. We're the market that's providing the stalls for the vendors, and the buyers and the sellers can make the rules together. So if you don't agree with the terms of the buyer, you always opt in.
Thank you.